and welcome back to another episode of the Inside Lines podcast. I'm your host, Atoya Burleson.
And I am Tia Avril.
Coming up a bit later in the show, we'll be chatting with licensed mental health counselor Letha Atwater. We'll also be getting into our hot take this week, where we'll discuss the ongoing drama between the I Am Athlete podcast and the Pivot podcast, as well as get personal insights from special guests that we're going to tell you about in a little bit in regards to what's going on. But first, we've got a request for you. Please take a moment to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, take a moment and write a quick review. Just say something about us and why you guys enjoy listening. It really helps out a lot. Okay, enough about that. Tia, we've got a special guest in the house.
Yes. Welcome back, our favorite guest, Nate Burleson.
Woohoo!
Hey, what's up? It's about time. I've been waiting. I can't wait to get started. I'm looking forward to talking with you guys.
Well, we're excited to have you on. It's been a minute. We've had a lot of people on, but you're a busy guy, so we're happy to get you back in just for this specific hot take. It's time for this week's hot take. Tia, what we got?
Okay, this week in Hot Takes, we're discussing the drama between the host of the I Am Athlete podcast and the Pivot podcast. For a little bit of background, the I Am Athlete podcast was started by veteran NFL wide receiver Brandon Marshall alongside retired NFL stars Fred Taylor, Channing Crowder, and Ryan Clark, who was then replaced by Reggie Wayne. The podcast was an instant success, bringing in a wide range of some of your favorite guests. And as I Am Athlete continued to grow, they started to branch out to other shows like I Am Woman and I Am NASCAR. Now, for those of us on the outside, everything seemed to be okay. Like it seemed to be peaches and cream. That is until November of 2021, when the Pivot podcast launched with hosts Fred Taylor, Channing Crowder, and Ryan Clark. What we later found out was the original host of I'm Athlete had a disagreement, basically in terms of ownership, right? According to Brandon Marshall, when he came up with the idea, he asked each host to contribute $35,000 each to cover the cost for recording the season. And if y'all know Brandon don't half-ass nothing. He was all in, right?
That's a fact.
According to Brandon, Channing said that he didn't want to take the risk. He would prefer accepting a talent fee, basically being paid to be a host on the podcast. Fred Taylor came back and said he did want ownership, but come to find out, they never quite closed the loop on that. Fred never provided the initial $35K investment. Of course, season 1 launches, takes off, and after the success of season 1, Fred circled back with Brandon on some, okay, I want my 25% ownership. And by the way, I wanted at the $35,000 that we talked about before. And from Brandon's perspective, he stated, or he felt like, well, number one, the evaluation of the business was no longer called for a 25% ownership, given a $35,000 investment. But he also brought in some other owners, like he had his wife, like I said before, who launched I Am Woman, and then he had some business partners that also took ownership. Now, of course, when the Pivot launched, they started subtweeting, sub-messaging, going on other podcasts, etc., basically kind of disparaging Brandon. And Brandon finally came out a few weeks ago with his version of the story. So my question to you, Nate and Atoya, do y'all think Brandon was wrong not to allow the original host to buy in at the original evaluation?
Fat Joe said yesterday's price ain't today's price. What I mean by that is, once you start something and it grows, you can't give the same type of evaluation of your brand, of your company, if it is much larger than it was a year ago. Hell, some would say 6 months ago. Some would say a week ago. Brandon Marshall is a guy that is going to give you everything he got, right? Financially, also with his energy, with his time. So I know he's invested in more ways than one. So when it came to him launching this, I know initially he wanted to give guys that he was bringing on, Channing, Fred, Ocho Cinco, the opportunity to be part of the brand. Now, I can't speak on who's wrong, but I can say everybody's right in this situation. And what do I mean by everybody's right? Brandon He puts his name on the line to create I Am Athlete. Of course, he has a say in how things go contractually, how they create brands that stem off of the initial brand. Channing comes in, Fred Taylor, Ocho Cinco, Ryan Clark has his podcast. All these guys started to see the impact that I Am Athlete is making, and then they're seeing their names pop up in all of these different verticals, whether it's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all of these different things that these guys are doing. So for Brandon to look at these individuals and say, I can't offer you what you want, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially when there's other opportunities out there. Brandon was doing his live, and he basically painted out everything. He said, Fred, he didn't get around to actually signing the deal, so it didn't work out in the end. He said Channing kept moving the goalpost back, which essentially he's saying there was a number they agreed upon, and then there was another number that Channing came up with. So they wanted to walk away because of that reason.
This was on IG Live, you said?
This was on the IG Live that Brandon was doing. And then he went, and then he said, Ryan Clark was weak. He said, Ryan Clark's the weakest of them all. And I don't know if he was necessarily talking about Ryan Clark as a player. I wouldn't think so because Ryan was a beast. But maybe his relationship with him might be weak or weakened because of this. Because essentially, from the outside looking in, it looks like Ryan Clark came in, snatched a couple of his guys. They started to pivot, and the pivot has been successful since. I typed in during the IG Live, I said, this comes down to egos and contracts and the inability to coexist in a new space, which is athletes doing podcasts in this type of fashion. But then the last thing I said was, remember, Biggie said more money, more problems. It also goes for views online. So once the views started happening, the clicks, the engagement, the popularity, the praise, everybody wants a bigger piece of the pie once they realize how flavorful it is. So I know Ryan. I know Brandon. I know Fred Taylor. I met Channing a couple of times. I know Ocho Cinco. I know the new guys that are on there. Pac-Man and also my guy Shady McCoy. I know all of these guys that are involved in the podcast. I feel like they all have the right approach. They just have to figure out how to coexist. And this is unique in a sense that athletes are good because they're competitive. Athletes are good because they're passionate. Mm-hmm. Athletes are good because they're territorial. And these guys, they were that. And those same traits make us good in media, on TV, in radio, in podcasting. But the competition and being territorial, that doesn't always translate well in the real world, in the corporate world. I'm not saying you have to move over and give up your lane. I'm just saying there's enough food on the table for everybody to eat. That's why I feel. That's how I feel.
I was just going to say, do you feel like, you think about these athletes, right? And I'm thinking about from the perspective of when you played, you guys were all players, right? So you guys were on the field together. You were teammates. You did everything together. And whenever there was any type of contract negotiations or business, it was done separate from you all, right? So now you're operating in a space where you're still teammates in the sense, and you still have that brotherhood, but now you have to do business together. Do you think that that's why they each took it so personal? Because was there a business was there not a business separation versus, that emotional or family tie of brotherhood that kind of caused this? Because think about it. I mean, there's business done all the time, and business is business. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. What was it about this that made them get to the point where they had to go on IG Lives and on their shows and air out all the financial business that necessarily didn't work out, and that's okay?
Yeah, one, let me say, I don't feel like going on IG Live or even any public platform and speaking poorly on each other. I never thought that is an easy way to resolve things. Actually, it's the hardest way to resolve things. And I got to be honest, both sides have been guilty throwing little subs out there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I've seen more subs in a sandwich shop between these two podcasts. And I feel like that's a little bit messy. This isn't, Real Housewives or Love and Hip Hop. I just feel like they can handle all of that behind closed doors. But Toya, to your point, these guys, when we operate in the locker room, the guy next to me might get a contract, but I wasn't in there negotiating with him. So
Right.
his money has nothing to do with my money. And we say all the time in the locker room, it's a common phrase, don't count other people's pockets, which means so-and-so gets a new contract. You can ask him about it, but don't dive into his details. So-and-so got problems paying his mortgage. You can ask about him, but don't tease him about it. Another guy is getting his car repossessed in the parking lot. You can ask him about it, but don't count his pockets. He might be struggling. So when it came to these guys sharing not only the actual space, the physical space on camera and the audio space on these podcasts, but the money they were sharing. But what makes it difficult, what causes the gray area, is when you see the sponsors come in and you see the views go up and you see the likes and the tweets and the TikToks, and all of a sudden you're stuck in a contract that you feel like you're outperforming. So an athlete will always feel like an athlete. So if I shook somebody's hand and said, all right, I'm gonna sign on to this show and I'm gonna do this at this price or this rate, a year from now, I see immediate success. And I also see my face being clipped off and shown across all of these different platforms. Now I got to go to the organization. I got to go to whether it's Brandon or Ryan Clark and say, I feel like I've outperformed this contract. Let's talk money. Now, it's up to the boss, whoever's in charge, whether that be Brandon for I Am Athlete or Ryan for the Pivot. They have the opportunity there to say, no. You are in a deal that we agreed upon, or you can talk to them and work something out.
What you just said boils down to accountability, right? Because what you just talked about was you agreed to something, right? And after some time, you felt like, to your point, you outperformed it, or that, okay, maybe I didn't, have my best interests in mind. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I need to get my negotiation skills up because this contract is no longer suitable for me. Instead of it being like the accountability piece, like I signed this. He didn't put a gun against my head or to my head and force me to do it. I signed this. It don't work for me. Let me walk away peacefully and do my own thing if we can't come to an agreement. It was this catty stuff that I'm like, that piece was more unnecessary to me.
I agree with that. But at the same time, I feel like you have to be very fluid in a space that you're all swimming in for the first time. Like these are waters that neither of these individuals have swam in. So if there is an adjustment that needs to be made, then I feel like it would have been done already. Like if Fred and Channing wanted to stay, then they would still be on the I Am Athlete podcast. We talked about this off camera, and I feel like it applies to this situation when it comes to groups of men, whether it's sports teams, singing groups, podcasting. There's two reasons they break up: women and money. In this situation, there isn't anything that has to do with women.
No, we staying out of this one.
No drama.
That's men drama.
Money. It's all about the money, and the money. And I'm not saying it's all about the money. Like these guys is thirsting for the dollar, and that's the reason why they left. Money is also a sign of respect. So I feel like if I feel like you're respecting my talent, then you're going to give me what it's worth. And then there's also like the dynamic between Ryan Clark adding Channing and Fred Taylor, who were on I Am Athlete and made them very successful. So now everybody's looking at these guys as this competition, and some fingers pointing to Ryan saying, bro, you were just rocking with Brandon. How did you turn around and snatch a couple of his guys and not let them know with a fair amount of time? So I want to be able to broker something between the two.
It's the same way teams trade players all the time. It's a business. And I think that everybody's taking this so personal. It's like immature. Like I feel like it's the emotionally immature of them to like take it personal. This is a business. And I understand you guys know each other, that you're brothers, that, you competed against one another. I get all of that. But at the end of the day, it's a business. And whatever you sign contractually, you have to accept that. Now, here's my question for you, Nate. Do you think you could broker something where you could sit down with I Am Athlete and with Pivot and come to resolution here? Because if it's just egos, if it's just, immaturity emotionally because they took things personal, which you can't do in business, Is this something that you feel like you can help to resolve? Because at the end of the day, both of the podcasts are doing well. They're going to continue to do well. So
dope.
why sit here and argue and beef with each other? Do you think that you can sit down between the two of them and kind of work something out?
I think I can. I definitely think I can, because even within the disagreements, there's a high level of respect for one another. And maybe it's not in podcasting anymore because they're in competition, but respect as men and respect as players. And that goes a long way. That's a fraternity that will always be a part of. So I would love to sit down with these guys. It would be like some, Real Housewives type reunion vibes. Hopefully there won't be no wine thrown or no fights and no cameras chasing anybody to the backstage. But I do think we need to do something like that. And here's another reason why I feel like there's been these subs at each other and they take to their podcast or even their IG lives to talk a little trash and fling a little bit of dirt on one another. It's just like, you remember when we were in school and somebody would be getting into it to the right of you and you're like, oh, look at them. They ain't gonna do nothing. They over there just talking and they're just bumping their gums. And then by the time everybody looks and they realize everybody's looking, that bumping the gums and that little confrontation turns into pushing and shoving, and one person gets really loud. They're like, oh, you want to fight now? And then they realize, because of the crowd watching, I got to take it up a notch.
I got to do something.
We have to understand that this world we're living in is one big ass lunchroom. That's all it is. So I don't care if a guy has money, popularity. I don't care if he's been to Pro Bowls, Super Bowls. These guys are incredible athletes with incredible resumes and are doing great things in their post careers, but they're working inside the largest lunchroom ever, which is the digital space. So more eyes that are paying attention, everybody whispering, whose fault? Fight, 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 fight. All I would want these guys to do is I want to encourage these guys not to listen to the chants. Don't engage in a fight if you don't feel like throwing no fists. You can handle all this behind camera. And to be honest, this is why I really want to sit down with these guys. Forget about coexisting. What if these guys, you don't have to like team up together, but they can help each other. They can help each other with guests. They can use these guys. They can use each other as a ping pong in order to create even more traffic to their brands.
Right, because the reality is none of us have to choose one or the other. We can listen to both. Like there's no where you have to choose one side. Everybody can win here. So I agree.
Like you said, there's room for both. I think one thing that kind of stood out in Brandon's interview an episode of I Am Athlete where Brandon told his side of the story in more detail, was Joe Budden was on there. And I hate to even say this because I don't agree with Joe Budden often, but he was sharing his story because he had a similar situation with his previous co-host on his podcast.
Rory and Maul.
With Rory and Maul, where he said, yo, I was the last person to know that my friends no longer looked at me friendly. Like he didn't know that things had gotten as bad as they did, or that his friends or his co-hosts have gotten to a point of such disgruntledness, right? And so when I kind of look at I Am Athlete, like that there's a disagreement or some things that is going on regarding ownership, but did you really think, or like I'm saying this from Brandon's perspective, did you really think it was that bad to the point where you can lose a brother? Right. So
yeah, or why not just have a conversation? Why not just have a man-to-man conversation and state how you feel? I feel like a lot of relationships can be resolved by just having a conversation. And sometimes in that conversation, just hearing each other without rhetorically replying, and just agree to disagree at the end of the day. You don't have to always agree, but just giving each person an opportunity to speak and hear each other goes a long way.
It will take some time. I guarantee they'll sit down. I guarantee as a group, it will sit down. And to be honest, at this point, you might as well capitalize off of the drama. And it might be one of their highest viewed shows. You know what I'm saying? If they sit down together, they're going to eat off of it. Yeah. So it's going to be all right. It's all good in the world of podcasting because here we are talking about it.
That's right. Okay, guys. That's it for this week's Hot Takes. Thank you, Nate, for joining us.
Yes.
I'll be back soon. I got to come back and break down the football season, right?
Yes. We got lots to talk about. In the meantime, we want you on for fantasy football, so don't leave too soon. Keep some room in your schedule for us.
I got you.
Pencil us in. All right, guys, make sure you let us know what you think. Do you think the host of The Pivot, that they were right in leaving, given that they weren't allowed to buy in at the original evaluation? You think they were right for leaving, or do you think Brandon was in the wrong for not allowing them to do so? Let us know at speakpipe.com/insidelines.
And coming up next, our conversation with Letha Atwater. On the show today, we have an NFL wife that has seen all sides of the football. She and her husband spent 10 years with the Denver Broncos, where he became a Super Bowl champ and Hall of Famer. She's a licensed mental health and addiction counselor, which is a hot topic now in the NFL. Please welcome to the show, Letha Atwater. How are you, Letha?
I am doing great. How are you?
We're doing great as well. We're so excited to have you on and just talk a little bit of everything. So let's just get into it. Let's talk about kind of where you started. We're going to go back a little bit, but before we do that, I want to talk about kind of where we are in the NFL. So this kind of all comes forward full circle. NFL is, it's been so interesting, everything going on in the NFL with mental health and mental health in general and athletes. People are very outspoken. And I just want to talk to you because you've witnessed the highs, the lows of being in the NFL, as well as you being a mental health counselor. I want to hear from your perspective as a wife and a professional, kind of what you think about what you see now versus back in the day when your husband played, how they didn't really talk about it as much.
Wow. I mean, you talk about coming full circle. So where we are now with people from all the different sports coming out talking about I am okay not being okay, and sharing that message and trying to break the stigma is so different from where we were. I remember when Steve was playing, he retired in 2000. And so when he was playing, I had all this background and in the brain and the mind and everything. And I'm talking to him constantly about that play that happened, how are you going to let that go so that you can get back on the field? Don't bring your stuff home. And that was such a huge sign of weakness. Mm-hmm. And I would irritate him so much, even bringing up the subject. There could actually be some things that he was ruminating on. And so I would say always, how do you feel about that? What do you mean, how do I feel? That would be his response because, big boys don't cry. I don't need to talk about that. But over time, I think he got used to that coming from me. And so I was that sounding board for him that other people didn't necessarily have.
I feel like, especially then, men didn't really have the language to even really express how they felt. So if it wasn't, I'm mad as hell about that play because whatever, they didn't express the other emotions, I feel disappointed in myself or whatever. So you having that background, I'm sure it helped him. Of course, you're his wife, but just be more comfortable with okay, I can put language around this.
Right. And he felt okay talking to me about it, even though it still was a taboo subject outside of the house. But he was able to talk about when he came closer to the end of his career, his feelings around that not sure if he could cut it for another season and needing another surgery and what all of that felt like and feeling disappointed if he missed a tackle. He was able to say those words that were just so taboo in society at large.
And I think about you being a mental health counselor and you having the right words. I think about the wives that don't have the right words, right? They don't know what to say. And not being able to have those conversations. What would you say to them? How would you, I guess, help them to find the right words to communicate with their significant other?
That's such a good question. And I'm fortunate and blessed enough to kind of be that voice for so many people who currently play, as well as some of the wives who have gone through that transition of retirement. And I'm just like a confidant for people, and they really feel comfortable coming and saying, like, I don't know what to do. And a lot of what I share is that you don't have to always know, but being aware, like paying attention and noticing when someone is just a little bit off of their game at home, so to speak. You know, the different game when you come in the door and you're expected to just be dad or just be my husband, but you're still bringing that stuff with you. And so I think it's really important for us to just notice that our significant other is a little bit off and not pour everything on them when they walk in the door, because like we've been away from them. We want to share our day or share what happened with the kids. They're not in a headspace to hear it oftentimes when they walk in. And how do you be supportive without being quote unquote nagging? And so like constantly saying, as I was saying to Steve, that like, I got you, I'm here. And whatever you're going through, we'll get through this together. I think that without even asking a lot of questions could be really helpful for a lot of people.
You know, that's actually a good point. And that goes even beyond athletes. Like, and this is applicable for women too. But you think after you done worked all day long, because I know people like to think the guys just get out there and play a game. It is actually work. But whether you are coming home from a bank job or coming home from a construction job, whatever, you're not in the mental space to immediately jump into whatever the next round of responsibilities are. So just taking a beat, to your point, to just allow people to transition back into the space and have that moment, I'm sure will help a lot of people. We had this thing where Steve would come in and I would always have the kids like in the playroom, because they would watch him coming through the driveway and it's like, Daddy's on his way, Daddy's on the way. So we could get that experience of knowing like Daddy's here. So they had that safety and security, and then they get to say hi. And then I would just take them off so that they could play and give him time to go into his office and kind of unwind. And then when we came back together as a family for dinner, he could talk about his day, we could talk about our day, and everybody was in a good headspace as opposed to him being there physically but not mentally with us.
That's actually really good. I like that idea. I mean, you think about just anybody coming home in general. Sometimes I just need a minute. Like I walk in and I'm like, they're mom. Yes. You know, people be hiding because they just need a minute. You just need a minute to just like reflect and to let things go. To get in the right headspace. I mean, it was a word right there. So thank you for sharing that. It's really good. Let's back it up a bit. Let's talk about back in the day, how you and Steve met. Y'all met in college, right?
Oh my goodness. So we have been together since we were teenagers. We met in college. We went to University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. We met freshman year. And
wow.
I think people say, why are you guys still together? How are you guys? We're almost at 32 years marriage. So
listen, you need an award for that, girl.
Listen.
An award.
But it's really like we became best friends. Like there was nothing between us other than just a friendship. We studied together and talked about football, and I love sports, and I was a chemistry major and he hated chemistry. So we had these things that were kind of in common, but not everything was in common. So it gave us a lot of good conversation.
Time out. You said a chemistry major?
Yes.
So wait, we gotta talk about that, because I was not expecting you to say you were a chemistry major and now you're licensed mental counselor. Okay, let's back up. How did you go from a chemistry major to what you're doing now? That's pretty cool.
Oh, that's a loaded question, because I was pre-med and I actually went to medical school to be a doctor. During my senior year, we were pregnant with our oldest child and I got toxemia and nearly died. Steve was playing in the NFL at the time, and we had such a horrible, horrible experience. And again, like, who can talk about that? So we literally went through that alone with just our immediate family involved. And so I ended up leaving medicine. So it's like when your blood pressure goes sky high while you're pregnant. And that's kind of like basic, right? But there's like this
like similar
preeclampsia. Yes, but full blown, whole body toxic organs shutting down. And so it was horrible. And so I took time off from school. And then you know how life is. Child number 2 was like on the way, and we didn't have any family close to where we lived. And so my mom would fly back and forth to help us out. But after a while, it became more like what's more important, that I care for others or I care for like my family. And so I had to kind of surrender and let that go while I was raising kids. And then, so we have 4. And then that was when I was able to jump back in.
So you took a break for a while and made sure that the kids were okay, made sure that the family was okay, which a lot of wives do. You know, we have our own lives, we have our careers, you know, we go to college, but to your point, like somebody has to stay home and make sure that the family's okay. And then when you pick up kind of where you left off, did you notice? Okay, so here's my question to that. Did you notice when you said, I kind of picked up later, did your life change and all these different things change for you mentally? And that's why you decided to go into mental health counseling? Like, what was it that made you switch?
I think for me, I was always interested in psychiatry and neurology. So I was always intrigued by the brain and how it worked, and like that, how people feel stress, but feel it all over. Like literally, you know, stress is not this thing that you can't see. You can literally see when someone is stressed. So I just want to like remove that thing where people are like, oh, you can see a broken leg, but you can't see the mental stuff. You can see it. You're just not noticing. And so that whole thing was always really important to me. So what I did, and I volunteered at hospitals because then I had control of my time. So I did a lot of volunteering. And then when it was time to go back to school to work in medicine, I still had to decide, do I want to commit that much of my life away from my family? Steve had already like committed a great deal of time away from the family. I didn't think it was fair for both parents to do that because these kids didn't ask to be here. And so as I noticed, particularly with the transition and the lack of support that was going on for retiring and going into like quote unquote real world, there was just no support. We had little kids that were coming up playing football and seeing what was happening to them, but there was no support around that. Like they were even told, you know, from a very early age playing sports, like don't tell your parents about that, or, you know, this is football talk or whatever. And so I just knew I had this calling inside that like, I have to do something. I have to be that person that steps out to say, like, there are a lot of people that we know that are struggling, and what can I do to make that better? And so I jumped in, and people started just talking to me about things, but I wasn't licensed. But before long, it's like everybody's talking to me about things because I'm studying, but I haven't gone back to get the degree. And so I just decided, let me just go back and get the degree and become licensed in it.
But how was that for you? So we often talk about like the players transitioning, like, oh, they've been doing football or whatever their respective sports is for umpteen years and they have to transition. Like that is a harsh and hard transition for them, right? But, and I think about you, like you, chemistry major, knew you were going pre-med, and then all of a sudden, like you can't do what you had planned on doing, you know, even though I know it's a sacrifice for the family, all of that still kind of takes a toll usually on people mentally. So how was that for you?
I think being in a field is more like practicing what you preach. So for me, it was more about using the skills that I had learned to help others, using those skills for myself. And so there were times certainly when, especially in the beginning, when I had taken off for X amount of time, but then that time came and I have this little baby that needs mama at home. Like I'm still breastfeeding. What the heck? And now I'm supposed to like just pump and go. It's like, yeah, no, that sounds like a gas station to me. I can't do that.
Oh,
so for me,
she's right. That's exactly how I felt. I was like, I can't do this. This is not realistic at all.
Yeah.
See, I was the
and
opposite.
Just having, I think,
not complete opposite, because it wasn't like I didn't care. but
That's okay. We know what you're saying. We know what you're saying.
but it was so difficult for me because I just was like, I just was hitting my groove in my career, and like I'm winning awards and everything, and now I gotta be the one that stopped. So I didn't last that long. I only was a stay-at-home mom for a year at first, and then I went back to work.
And it's so, that's so important though, because it's different for everybody's situation. I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. That is not a choice that many women have in this world. Like many of us are not able to do that. So when I know for sure that I was blessed in that regard. And so another part of it was not feeling guilty for the blessing. So there were times when like I didn't want to say it, because like I felt guilty about like, oh, now you can just stay at home, huh? Because you had a baby. And so that was like all that guilt to go along with it. And I really had to like work on myself.
Was it guilt or was it shame?
Both.
Because I eventually quit. I did eventually quit again. But
yeah, because Tia's back at home now. She didn't last long when she ran back to the career world. She's like, well, see y'all later. I'm going back home.
I lasted 3 years again. But I think I was a little bit ashamed that I was a stay-at-home mom.
What? Why?
In your head, you kind of think like, oh, they're football wives. Like, they don't do anything. And so, we know being a mom is a full-time job, blah, 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 whatever. We know that, right? But I still kind of had that shame, like, oh my gosh, when people come and ask me like, oh, so what is it that you do? I'm like, take care of my kid, And so I had to overcome that, right? Because number one, I'm like, if you sit and talk to these women, we got attorneys, we got prosecutors, we got licensed therapists, we have MDs, we have a wide range of women in our circle. So it's not that they're not intelligent or ambitious or any of those things. I had to like get over that and also see it, to be honest.
Yeah. That's so important for us to be talking about because there's that shame, blame, and guilt. So, if you want to blame someone, like you didn't have to get pregnant is what I heard from people. You're the one who chose to have a baby. It's like, okay, so you're blaming me now for wanting to be at home and be a good mom to my family. And then like you said, that shame piece of like, I feel like people who look like me get asked this question more than what I noticed with other people who were staying at home. So what do you do? What do you do? Why is there an expectation that I have to be doing anything other than what I'm called to do right now in my life? I don't think that's a decision anyone else should be making.
I agree. And it's not forever. That's what I had to tell myself. Like, it's not forever. I remember, so I had a different type of guilt. I remember telling my husband, like, okay, when he gets old enough, he's going back and I'm going to take care of, I'm going to go back to work and, and I remember I got to that point and I remember thinking like, I cannot give you to anybody else to take care of you when I know no one's going to take care of you like I will. That's where my guilt came from. And that's why I decided to stay at home. And that was so important for me because I knew if I went back, life would fly by and I would miss it. And I was like, I can't do it. I couldn't do it. So I stayed and so my guilt was a little different. Of course, I had the moments where I wanted to go back and do something different. I think you always have that inside of you because it's a gift, but you definitely sacrifice for your family and just do what's best for them in the moment.
Because this is all a system. It's not an individual. And so what's best for my family is oftentimes best for me and vice versa. But we have to work together within that system. It can't just be about one part because then the other wheels are just going to stop turning. So we have to figure out a way that we can make this thing work for the unit.
All right. So we're going to talk about a big topic. We talked a little bit about mental health. And we've seen in the news where, players have been struggling, whether it's during the season, whether it's post-retirement. And there's been some steps taken to help them, but it doesn't seem to be enough. And as someone that is licensed, what would you say? I know it's come a long ways from when Steve played, but what would you say, even seeing it now, okay, we've come a long way, but what would you suggest we do more of?
I think for starters, each team now has, as I understand it, a mental health person that's a part of the team for players to see. But I'm not sure, and I've asked Steve this, like, would he have gone to a person that was hired by the team? Everybody has the same boss. Ultimately, everybody's paycheck is coming from the same person. And he and others who I have talked to have said that they wouldn't have been comfortable with that. So I think having more people that are available to support players so that they don't have to go to that one person to check in, because like, okay, we checked that box, we hired our person, but how many people are actually using the person? So I think that's where we start. And then I also think, again, when we go back to the system, so talking to a player about what's going on with them right there in the moment is not like addressing what's going on for the whole person. So like, he's more than just a football player. We have to start talking about his other roles so that, first of all, he doesn't just get caught up in his identity as a football player, because he's also oftentimes a husband and a father and a son, all of these things. They need to have a safe place to talk about all of this with someone else.
You're right, because that's neglected, right? It's like you're a number and this is what you do. And
this is it.
Yes.
And no one really wants to talk to them, from what I've heard. And again, I'm not in there in that space. No one really talks to them about other struggles that are going on in their lives. And then they can't even be honest if they are self-medicating, because you can't tell someone who is hired by the team that I'm struggling with my pain medicine, taking it more than I need to take it, because I'm struggling with anxiety or performance anxiety, or like I'm feeling depressed, like all these things that humans go through that athletes are not supposed to experience.
What would you suggest, like a significant other that can see, to your point, that, okay, he's displaying some anxiety issues or he's displaying some substance abuse issues, but they don't know where to go? Because to your point, when you brought up, which I meant to circle back to it, but when you brought up like, okay, you and your family, you guys are in Denver, your family, or, your guys' immediate family, it's not present. You're there solo, right? So now you're in the city solo and you see that your significant other is struggling with some sort of something, right? And they may not want to go to the team. Where would you suggest they do or start to even address some things like that?
So I think first, again, it starts at home, with being able to be a supportive unit for each other. We have each other. And I notice that XYZ, and I'm wondering, it's just a simple, like, this is what I see. Like, you can't say I don't see what I see. So that part is kind of easy. Like, I'm noticing that you're taking your pain pills like twice as much as you were taking a month ago. I'm wondering if you're in a lot of physical pain or if there's something else going on. Those are like simple ways to get conversations started. Now, you might get backlash. Well, why are you monitoring my pills? Why are you worried about it? I'm worried because I care about you. I'm asking because I care and I'm here to support you. And so like coming back with the right words don't meet that easy go-to feeling of anger with anger, but meet it with kindness and care and compassion. And when people know for sure, like I'm there, I'm here because I love you, it's a different reaction that's going to come over time. They're not going to feel comfortable constantly coming back with sarcasm and anger if you keep coming forward with love and care.
That's good. That's really good. So let's talk about wives a little more. How was it in Denver? I know you said you didn't have your immediate family there. Were you able to form a close knit group of women? Did it take time? What was your experience like?
So I came as a fiance, and I don't know where you guys were in that process, but that is like a tough road to come in.
Tell them
as
about
a fiance. And how many times was I told, in addition to like, being in earshot of people saying it, which I'm still convinced was on purpose. Oh, she's not going to last. oh, she won't make it. She's not going to make the cut. And I was super busy.
You mean from like other spouses, wives, or from the team?
Yes. No, from other wives who were already with the team when we came. It was brutal.
I've heard that before. Brutal. I have heard that before. And how was it awkward in the point to when you got married? Were those people still there? And then they're like, oh, hey, girl. Like they didn't just talk about you before. Like, how was that?
So I was super busy because I was in medical school and Steve was super busy with football. And so a lot of the things that were happening, like I couldn't participate in a lot of things. So I think that was also like really protective for me. So I didn't get as much of the cattiness. So when we were married and there were still people like questioning, of course, people are like, oh, we'll see how long that lasts. I mean, it was just so much. Yes. We can be horrible to each other.
She said we can be horrible to each other, and it's a thing. It is a thing amongst women.
Yeah.
It's so true. And like, it's funny when you think back. It's not funny, but when you think back to that, like people don't realize how deep their words cut and how cold, when you're cold like that, how it really truly affects people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you think post-marriage and the question of, oh, how long is it going to last, yada, 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 did it have something to do with the fact that you were also doing your own thing? Like you were going to medical school and a lot of times, granted, I didn't have that experience, but the stories I've heard, a lot of times the women are stay-at-home women who have sacrificed their plans or whatever to support their significant other. So then they see you come in med school. And was it more of a, okay, well, she's not as tuned in as maybe we are kind of thing? You think that was it? Or they were just being catty?
Oh, there was a lot of that. I think it protected me a lot from some of it, but it also led to me being ostracized from a lot of things also, because they're among women sometimes that she thinks she is, as opposed to coming asking me. So there was a lot of that she thinks she is that really wasn't true about me. But that was kind of, the word that was being spread around. And it interferes with like real close, genuine connections that could happen organically because you're pushing back against stuff all the time. And it doesn't make sense to me.
But what you learn is, as you get older, of course, is you learn it's their own insecurities. Like I think, when people first do that to you, you think something's wrong with you, but you quickly learn as you get older, like, oh, that wasn't me. That was their own insecurities being projected onto me. I mean, I remember someone like that, in Detroit, and I thought the same thing, like, what is the problem? Like, but it's true. Tia knows who I'm talking about, but you realize it's their own insecurities, their own issues that they have to resolve that, there's nothing you can do about it.
Well, Steve said to me one time, he was like, well, what did you say? I was like, I literally didn't say anything. I didn't do anything. And so it wasn't just like me, like sometimes questioning. He would sometimes be like, well, did you do anything? He's like, what the heck is going on? But again, I think as you get older and more set in yourself, knowing who you are, then it just kind of falls off of you. I'm not saying that it's all over now, because it's not. But I'm just better able to deal with it.
I was the reverse in that I was a girlfriend and we were living separately. And then when I got pregnant and moved to Michigan, I was now a child. I was his child's mother. I don't use baby mama. I was his child's mother. And I just knew going into that very first women's brunch, I'm like, okay, they're going to say something. I got this baby, 6 weeks old. I'm not married, all the things. And I walked in and Atoya was the first person I met. And I was like, oh,
now
I think I'm going to be good. I think I'm going to be good,
Yes.
But it was definitely like my insecurity of like, okay, I don't have a ring. And I wasn't even looking for one at that time, but it just was still like societal pressures.
Yes. And it's so sad that you have to like live up to other people's expectations to be accepted. It is so sad. And I always told myself, because before I was in Detroit, I was in Seattle, and I was also in in Minnesota, where I was welcomed by Kim Culpepper, who was the quarterback's wife, and she was fantastic. And I remember saying, when I go to another team, I'm going to be open arms. I'm going to be just like her, because the feeling and the acceptance and the love that I received was so amazing. And like, how can you not like pass that on to someone else? So when I saw Tia sitting there with this little baby, I'm like, oh girl, come on over here. Like, because you remember. So why would you want to purposely make someone feel less than? It's just, that to me is unbelievable. But I'm glad that I met Tia, because here we are many, many years later.
Look at this. I love it. I needed to have met someone like you guys. And I'm not saying everyone was that way. There were some people who were. I still have some friends from day one where we're really, really close. And we talk about what it was like, when they came in, and how that differed from when I came in, and the people who were solid for me then, we're still solid now. But a lot of the ones who I say catty, they're not there now anyway. So, that I still think that may speak to something that was going on with them, their own insecurities, as opposed to something that was going on with me.
Yeah, so true. Moral of the story, ladies, be nice, be kind.
Be nice. I am like the Atoya. Every time I just welcome people. I just want people to be happy and be well, and know that you have support around you at all times. You don't have to do anything alone.
Nothing. And speaking of that, you talk about you talk about working with players and sometimes their significant others now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How is that transition? Because, you have a lens in which a lot of players look for, right? You can talk to a typical therapist, but they don't understand the intricacies of the NFL. But here you are, that you understand it. How beneficial for them and great for you. Talk about that.
I think it's, first of all, you speak to understanding the culture. It's like a subculture in and of itself. and like you said earlier, something about, one of you guys mentioned something about maybe basketball wise, or the idea of that type thing. So a lot of people who I talked to who had been to a therapist previously, their experience for the wives was this preconceived notion that, this is just like basketball wives, this Atlanta housewives coming in with all. And so they were already this is from a therapist, where they were made to feel like someone who they weren't from day one. And so I don't want to be that person. And having that insight lets me know that that's not the lives most of us live. We're everyday people going through everyday struggles.
And people forget that.
Exactly. And they don't fully realize that football families in general are more normal or common families, just in terms of financially. There's not a lot of football players that make this money that lasts the rest of their lifetime, right? Generally speaking, they have to go back into common workforce, and their families have to adjust to that too. So that's a pressure in and of itself, of the notion of well, you were a football wife, what are you doing working here? Or you were a football player, what are you doing here? And so.
And the false numbers they put out there, Tia. They tell everyone that you're making all of this, but you're really not. Yeah. And so, but they're but it's right here. But I was playing on NFL. I was playing Madden, and it said you made this much. Well, that's not real life. Okay.
Consider the source. Consider the source. And I think the other thing, even when talking with the guys, I think it's almost like a sigh of relief to know that this is someone who has an inside look of what playing at such a high level looks like, feels like some of the struggles. And even though it's not about me when I'm seeing people in the room, it gives them a sense of comfort in knowing this is someone who has probably experienced some of the same things that I'm going through now.
Yes, that relatability.
Do you specialize in any specific type of addiction?
Not addiction, not specifically, no. So any type of substance use. And I live in Denver, And there are a lot of struggles with substances here. Not saying that it's not everywhere, but there are a lot of substance use issues here in Colorado.
Can we talk about that really quick? Because I wanted to bring that up, and this is like the perfect way into it. Okay, so because there is this stigma, like, okay, in the NFL, right? You know, if you're caught using marijuana, there's all these fines and suspensions that happen. But players have really been pushing back on that and talking about how beneficial it is, you know, with pain, with mental health, so on and so forth. As a licensed counselor, how do you balance or teeter that line, and and do you feel like, you know, substance abuse can happen with any drug, and in particular with players? Is this like one of like let's hear your standpoint, because I want to know from the inside.
So this is something that's like near and dear to our hearts. Both me and my husband have family members who have struggled with substance use in the past. And so for us, it's just something where it's like, don't start because you don't know where it's going to take you. Everyone has their own unique experience with it. You'll find some people who smoke weed and they're very high functioning individuals. You'll find some people who use cocaine and they're still high functioning individuals for now, but you don't know what's going to happen later on in your life and the areas of your life that might eventually be impacted by it. And so even though I believe that people do experience relief from substances, we know this because we experience relief if we take Tylenol. That's a substance that we're putting into our body. You experience a different type of relief if you take Motrin or Advil. So naturally, substances act on our whole body. But when we come to psychoactive drugs and medications, now we're really doing things with our mind in addition to our physical body. And so our brain can start to like change its chemical balance based upon substances that we're giving it. And then over time, our brains just don't act the way they would normally act. And they don't give us the emotions and feelings that we would normally have naturally. So then we start to like need that substance to be happy. We need that substance to feel a certain way because the chemicals in our brain have changed and gotten used to us. We don't need to produce this anymore because we get a substance that takes the place of that. And so I think all of these things have to be considered when we start just saying, like, let's make things okay for everybody.
Would you say that's similar to food too? When we talk about foods, there's people that have addictions to foods and they start to need and crave. Let's talk about that part of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And diet is one of those big things that we talk about, like for transitions from the NFL. Just that part alone is like really a really big part of the transition. But absolutely, when it comes to foods, like it's one of those things that people are addicted to that we don't talk about. We see people struggling with their weight all the time, and we never look at it like this is a problem mentally. We look at it like, well, if they don't want to eat that much, they should stop eating. But it's really not that easy. Like there's really something else going on. Oftentimes there's something mentally going on that's underneath the eating. What we see is a symptom of the problem.
I was listening to this podcast and it's slipping my mind right now, but the entire podcast itself is about addiction. So each episode is something different. Like one substance abuse, it could be you addicted to exercising, like whatever. And so the one on food, I fully expected to hear about people that have like bulimia or anorexic or something, or that they were overweight and just like so gluttonous. And the way she approached it, she was like, no, like you can have a food addiction if you think about food all the time. Like so for example, because it's how I realized I'm like, oh, I have a food addiction. But so I struggle with my weight since having kids. Like that's it, right? I literally wake up in the morning and be like, okay, I'm going to fast until this time. And at this time, I'm going to eat this or whatever. And so even if I plan it out on Sunday and I know what to expect when I wake up in the morning, that's what I think about. Like, not in that I'm hungry, but just like I have to be very mindful of what I put in my body because I'm going to react differently. I didn't realize it was an addiction because it would really stop me in my tracks. Like if somebody is inviting me out, I'm like, what am I going to do to burn these calories? You know? Exactly. Look, I had to tell my husband, I'm like, no more
Yeah.
day dates.
Yeah.
Because day dates mean lunch. And I don't want to do that. Okay. I want to do something else. But I just didn't realize that was a form of addiction.
Right. And I think also, like, it sounds like there's a certain amount, and I'm not trying to diagnose you here, but there's also anxiety.
There is.
A
Yes,
certain amount of
ma'am.
anxiety associated with it. And so I think it's that anxiety that's driving that thinking about it, that ruminating on the act of eating and when to eat and how much to eat. So a lot of that is going on as well, it sounds like.
Absolutely. You sure? And I just started with a new counselor, but I told her, I just listened to this podcast, yada, yada, yada. This gives me anxiety. So I ain't worked through it yet. But you hit the nail right on the head.
Listen, if she don't work out, call Miss Letha, okay? You in good hands.
Yes. And the one thing that I tell people, like, what helps me more than anything else to stay, I'm like this. Like, that's just me. But that's just the way my life has been. But I've also always been really physically active. And so, like, I walk all the time. Like, if I have, like, between clients and I have like 10 minutes, like, I want to go for like 5 minutes walk and get back in, because it helps to keep my mind like clear. So Steve and I walk in the mornings. We get up early, sunrise, we're out walking. And as many times as I can get it in before night, we're walking again if I can get him to walk again. But it really, like, there's research out about the benefits of walking. And my thing is, like, move a muscle, change a thought. And so if you want to stop thinking about the same thing over and over again, get up and move. And it'll, like, take your mind off of that ruminating.
My tail gonna log about 400 minutes of exercise every day. It's so long.
I love exercising. It is my stress reliever.
Yes.
I love the endorphins. Like, I feel like I will not work out and they'd be like, when's the last time you worked out? And because I just feel like it relieves so much for me. If I do not work out, I can get real irritated easily. He's like, what's wrong? Did you work out? What's going on? Like, no, I haven't. And you guys are getting on my nerves. So it's true. Like working out, walking, those things, like, it really does. It does something to your mind, at least for me, where it takes me elsewhere. And sometimes you just need to be somewhere else mentally.
Yes. And, music will do that. For some people, it's like listening to music or playing music or just like writing and things like that. But there's so many coping skills that you can learn what works best for you. And then just kind of throw in a few other ones along the way, because there's nothing wrong with giving it a try. If it works for some people, it might work for you if you give it a try.
That's good. What about women? Let's talk about the women, the wives of these players. Do you work with wives as well?
Yes.
So do you have that? Because, I mean, you've been a wife. Do they talk about the things that, because, I mean, if I'm talking to Tia, I can talk to Tia about things that I can't talk to maybe some of my other girlfriends about because they weren't in the NFL or they wouldn't understand. And their comments like, oh, girl, you got a good life. Stop complaining, right? But I can talk to Tia about things and she understands, right? Do you ever witness that, when they come in, they just need somebody to talk to about stuff that they feel like no one else will understand?
Absolutely. Even like not just in a therapeutic setting, but also like we could just be at a gathering. It's like, hey, can you come here for a second? I need to talk to you about something. Like we could be at a barbecue and I get cornered because like it just feels good to be around someone who gets it. Like you don't have to explain every detail of it. Like it feels good to be able to have a girlfriend or like know that this person, I mean, Steve and I are the old heads around here. He works for the Broncos. And so we know like the younger people that are playing. And so it feels good to be able to say like, there's somebody I can talk to. But when it's in therapy, again, it's all about them and not about me. But I come with that lived experience, that understanding of exactly, so they don't have to like start from the beginning. Well, see, when you get drafted, then this happens, and then everybody found out about how much you like. I know all of that, so they don't have to explain all of that, and it helps us to move on to the bigger things.
Okay, I was just saying, I think about Kristen Bly. She's another one of our girlfriends. She was a Detroit Lioness, and she actually went into license. She's a licensed mental health counselor as well in North Carolina, and she said that it's very interesting because she's been in it a couple years now, but she's to that point where she wants to work with WISE. But is it true that when you do that, you only can do it like license-wise in your state, but you can talk to people outside of that, but just more in a confidant manner? How does that work?
So each state has its own requirements around. It's almost like if you think about a medical doctor, like doctors can write prescriptions in their states in general, but outside of this COVID thing, like you can't go into another state, write a prescription for someone. It just doesn't work that way across state lines unless there's some kind of reciprocity between states. Mental health is even more strict because they don't want us like trying to tell somebody something that works for the environment and the rules and the laws here in Colorado that might not exist in Oklahoma, say. And so it's very specific. You have to be licensed across state lines in order to work with people in different states.
But if you were at a barbecue out here in New York and I was like, Miss Letha, can I talk to you for a minute? Like, you're still allowed to talk to me, right? Like, we can still have girlfriend talk.
Oh, yeah, okay. We can have girlfriend talk, but I couldn't like diagnose you and then start coming up with a treatment plan. Like, all of that stuff just is not allowed, and it's not allowed for a really, really good reason.
Okay. That's just a little slide in.
Yeah, we were just at the Hall of Fame, and I got pulled over in a corner by lots of people. That's just how it is.
Okay, I'm just trying to help out all the ladies. If you need someone to talk to, you might want to slide up at the barbecue or at the Hall of Fame, wherever she is.
Right. So I'm like, have you been in that? Hold on, real quick. That Facebook group of like past and current NFL wives. In general, I'll be like, ooh, they need some people to talk to. But to your point, but make your way to the barbecue.
I am not big on social media for multiple reasons. So, no, I haven't been. I'm sure it's interesting, but I haven't.
That's a great word. Interesting.
Interesting. So to your point of everybody coming to you, cornering you in events where you may not necessarily want to talk about mental health, but in general, how do you decompress with everybody downloading onto you? Or how you not bring it home like you used to tell your husband?
For me, when work is over, work is over. Like, I'm really, really good about compartmentalizing things. So like if I'm I get up really, really early. So I'm a 4:30 a.m.er. Because I need my hours when no one's saying mom, Steve's not saying babe, like there's nothing going on. My siblings, my mom, no one's calling me, where I can get things done. And I get that walking in consistently, like clockwork. And when I'm walking, a lot of times I'm just like being mindful. Like literally, I'm looking at the squirrels and the birds are getting the worms. And, I'm noticing the berries on the trees, but I just want to enjoy that moment. I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about dinner. Like none of that. I'm just with nature. And that really just helps me to like stay grounded and let it all go. And then I end my day like that. Typically at the end of the day, I'm going for a walk. And so then I've just let it all go because tomorrow's coming and I got plenty of time to do all of that work all over again. But I don't have to carry all of that burden with me throughout the day.
That's a word, y'all. Let it go.
Let it go.
That's good. Okay, I have 3 questions, and you can do it however you want. First question is, I'd love to know your highlight in the NFL, your highlight post-retirement of the NFL, and then your overall highlight for yourself.
Ooh, highlight in the NFL. I would say it would have to, of course, like my family like could be in the answer for all of those. The first and foremost, my family's first. But I think just when the Broncos won that first Super Bowl, that was like the look on my husband's face was like unbelievable. And to see him like work so hard for something and then to get that level of achievement, I felt like he didn't just do it for himself as an individual. Like they did it, like that's teamwork and that's like family support. That it took so many people for something of that magnitude to happen, and to see that, to have someone that close to you experience that kind of, that level of joy and like genuine happiness. It just, I don't know, it just took my breath away.
That's beautiful.
And I guess post NFL, I mean, outside of he got in the Hall of Fame.
Talk about it.
Let's
talk
do
about it.
Listen.
But that took a while, right? Because he was inducted in 2020. But we just had the ceremony in 2021 because everything shut down, I want to say 3 to 4 weeks after he found out.
COVID and their cousins.
COVID, yes. And so life just kind of stopped. But even before that, like I told you guys, we have these 4 amazing children. And like seeing all of them.
What's their ages?
So I'm about to give away all of my age. I told you how long I've been married. So the oldest one just turned 30.
Nice.
And he went to law school and, just did great. Now, I'm not saying he likes law, but he went to law school. He graduated. The second one, yes, and the second one is 28. And then the third one is 26. So there's Stephen, DeAndre, and Paris. And they live all over the place. First 3 are boys. And then like our post-NFL gift was our daughter,
Girl.
Malaysia. And she is now in college. She's about to be a senior at Stanford. And so they're just, to see these individuals have such huge footsteps to fill. Our boys were playing football, and their dad is like Steve Atwater. I mean, you can't even imagine the pressure. They were crazy, and that's a whole different topic.
That talk about mental health, yeah.
Yes, and that stress and strain on our kids. We were in the South, in Atlanta, where football is everything, but there's also a lot of other stuff that goes on in the South. And we moved back there to try thinking like, this would be great. Our kids can like get away from being daddy's kids and just like play. I don't think it was a good decision because they were told multiple times, like, you're never going to be like your dad. You're never going to be as good as your dad, by their coaches. Just beating them down.
That's what ticked me off about the reporter. He's not a reporter. He's the anchor that made that comment about LeBron's son a couple weeks ago. Like it was a rec league, a EYBL game or something, and he went down, ended up doing a layup and not a dunk, and he was like, well, your daddy would have dunked it. Like that's what ticks me off, because to your point, I'm like, why would you force him to have to live up to those shoes?
Why?
Right.
Why?
Let him be his own person.
And I remember saying to so many coaches, like, you're talking about Steve the man, and you're comparing like our 10-year-old son to him.
Yeah.
And I would just like give them that look like, are you serious right now? Or was that a joke? But yeah, we had many, many meetings with coaches about just like how they were treating kids. And so again, like I've been on this for a really long time. This is damaging our children. And I don't want that for our kids or anyone else's kid. Like we can do better as adults. That's a whole different topic though.
We have to do a whole episode on that.
Yeah, we really do, because kids alone, like, and like to your point, think about kids now where like LeBron's son, everything is social media. Everything you do is on social media. They're judging you, talking about you, putting it out there. It's just unbelievable right now. And I think that does bring on its own set of mental health issues, because there's always the comparisons in your face all the time. So, I know I think about my boys too. When you talk about I have 2 boys that are in high school, and my daughter is our youngest. She's 7th grade. So, yeah, I think about them. We talk about that stuff a lot though, because I do want them to feel comfortable talking about it, and don't, their dad is still in the limelight. So it's a little different. So I have to like really talk to them and ask them questions and kind of pry a little bit as their mom, and just remind them of, their gifts and their abilities are from God, and whatever they're supposed to do, they're going to do. They don't have to do what their dad does. And it's a constant reminder, because to your point, it's not just coaches now, it's people behind the keyboards bullying all the time.
Yes, all the time. And it's too much of it. And that's another piece with that transition of how these things impact our children. And again, that's a whole show in and of itself. But I have been a strong advocate for like the young people who are the children of, and how do we support them through all of this as well.
Well, listen, we're going to ask you a couple football questions and we'll kind of wrap it up from there.
Okay.
My first question is, who is your favorite NFL team?
Oh, the Denver Broncos.
I knew you were going to say that. I thought you would throw a wrench in there and be like, since I was born here. But okay, Denver Broncos all day.
Denver Broncos all day.
All right. Question number 2 for you would be, if you were to pick a team that's going to win the Super Bowl, it doesn't have to be the Denver Broncos, even though that's your team, that's going to win the Super Bowl, that you can guarantee they don't even have to win it, they would be in the Super Bowl, who would it be?
So, we just got Russell Wilson.
I was just about to say, I'm jealous.
Sorry, Tia. Tia's in Seattle.
And I'm salty.
Okay, whole different conversation, but we will be there in 2 weeks. The season opener is the Broncos against Seattle on Monday night.
Okay, absolutely. We have to connect, because I'll be there too.
Okay. So now I'm going to go out on a limb and say, despite the fact that we have not had like great seasons for the last few years, but I do there's something different in the air since Russell's here. We got like new ownership. You guys know that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have this very diverse ownership team now. We got 2 Black women in ownership here with the Broncos, 2 Black women. Yes. As a part of the ownership team, we just got a new president, a Black man. So we have like everything is just new. Our general manager this is his 2nd year. Our head coach is new. Like we have all this newness. So there's so much excitement. If we can keep that rolling, I'm going to say the Broncos.
To your point about that, I think about Tia. When Tia was with me and she left me in Detroit and she went to Seattle and they had a new GM, they had all this newness rolling around, and that's when they won their Super Bowl. So to your point about there's something about stirring the pot and getting some freshness in there that changes the game. So I'm not mad at that pick. I can't even
look. Russ is cooking. Okay, Russ is cooking.
Yes.
Hey, you see them Instagram videos? He out there, just targets, boom. Bust. Oh, he's ready. He's ready. Y'all can say whatever y'all want to say. I'm ready.
Yeah. But it has been so awesome to chat with you.
Same here. This was more than I expected. Like this really felt like we're just sitting around the dinner table, just having a conversation. This felt really good.
That's the way we want it to feel. And we thank you so much. We really do. I know you don't have social media, but if someone wants to get a hold of you, where can they contact you?
Ooh, email.
Okay.
Email or phone. That's about it. I am on LinkedIn, but I don't even check it very often. But as a therapist, like there's so many boundary issues that could be crossed with the social media piece. And so I stay away from all of that, and then I don't have to worry.
How about this? If y'all have questions for her, y'all leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/insidelines or send us a message and we'll be sure to have our own, because she hit on so many gems. I marked so many clips that's one.
I love you. I feel like I've known you forever. I don't know why, but...
Oh, you know what? I forgot to tell you guys. We didn't talk about what I'm doing with Hall of Fame Health. So that's another piece that's out and available for NFL players. It's for all players, for their families, for their wives, their kids, their parents, their siblings. So it's more about so they come up with this this design where there are therapists all over the country that are a part of Hall of Fame Health. And then we have all of these centers of excellence where they're like treatment facilities, like inpatient treatment facilities around the country that's been vetted. And then we raise money. We just had like a major event in Denver 2 weeks ago that Steve and I hosted along with Mark Slara, raising money for players and their families to get mental health treatment. So this is huge. Actually, we were in Detroit, I want to say in May. We had an event in Detroit for it. So we go around the country like talking about it because it's so new. But really, we've gotten a lot of momentum going. And so many people are like calling and asking for help. And because we're trying to take away that barrier.
I love that.
There's no money for treatment. No one's going to say, like, you played 10 years. Why doesn't your husband, he played 10 years. Why don't you have the money? There's none of that. Like, you need the help, and we want to connect you to the people, and we're going to help with the money part of it as well.
We would love to get that information from you so we can share that, because that's a way for them to contact you and contact the organization. So that is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Miss Letha, you are amazing.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you on. We thank you so much. And we will put all the information that you give us in the show notes so that people can find you or find whatever it is they need. So we appreciate you. Thanks again.
Thank you both. Have a wonderful day. And keep being great.
Oh my gosh. Having Letha Atwater on was fantastic. She was so down to earth and so relatable. I absolutely loved it. What'd you think?
No, she was awesome. And I think I told y'all during the episode, I marked so many that I'm like, oh, that's a bar. But specifically, you know how she was talking about doing her walk, how she's present, how she's looking at the squirrels and, you know, fill in the blank, whatever. I need to do a better job of being present even in those mornings, because I also like going for a walk and stuff like that. Not to the degree that she does, but I do. But on those walks, or if I'm on the treadmill or whatever, my tail is answering emails. I'm playing in lunch. You know what? I got to run to the store, grab this. Like my brain does not start. And so to her point, that's not relaxing. That's not helping the mental part of that. So I got to do a better job of that. Exactly. So I need to work on that.
You know what? And I'm sure it took her like a while to get there, but the fact that she is that present in whatever is going on around her and within herself, it is something that a lot of us don't do. We get away from the house and go on a walk just to be on our phones or doing something else, to your point, and just not checking in with ourselves. So I love that she reminded us to do that. I also love that she shared about just remembering to be kind to people when they come to new teams and welcoming them, because she didn't necessarily get that. So the fact that, you know, she shared that story and was that vulnerable, I hope it impacts other women and they understand the importance of just welcoming others and being kind. So.
And that goes beyond even the team aspect, because you see that sometimes in the kids' schools, just the cliquish community amongst the parents and all the other kind of stuff.
PTO.
Yeah, just be.
You go into a party, a room, and people just looking at you and they don't want to speak. Yes, just say, hey, girl, hey. It's that simple.
It costs you nothing, okay?
All right, well, that's our show. For the latest on the Inside Lines podcast, make sure to follow us at Inside Lines Podcast on both Instagram and Facebook.
And don't forget to visit us at insidelinespodcast.com, where you can listen online and share your favorite episode. And lastly, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, or asking for a friend questions, please leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/insidelines.
Until then, leave it all out on the field. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.